Thank you for tuning in to the Toledo Track and Trail Podcast, where co-hosts Matt Bucher and Marty Wheeler interview motocross and off-road racing and riding icons to capture their stories and experiences for you. So buckle up those helmets, grab a handful of throttle, and get ready to listen to the Toledo Track and Trail Podcast. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is Season 2, Episode 7 of the Toledo Track and Trail Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Bucher, joined by my co-host, Marty Wheeler, and our favorite audio-visual man, Mr. AJ Underwood. Marty and I are both trail riding enthusiasts, and I'm sure a lot of our audience is too. But today we have the greatest of all time, the GOAT of trail riding advocates on the show today. They are the premier leaders in fighting for your right to ride public trails all across the country. We are honored to be joined by two representatives of the National Off-Highway Vehicle Conservation Council, or NOHVCC for short. We want to welcome NOHVCC Executive Director Dwayne Taylor and Program Director Mark Hildesheim to the Toledo Track and Trail Podcast. Welcome, Dwayne and Mark.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Well, let's jump in because you guys both work for NOHVCC, and just give the audience a general view, Dwayne, of what NOHVCC is. You clearly don't want to say National Off-Highway Vehicle Conservation Council 5 times fast, because I cannot. But give us an overview of what NOHVCC is, what you guys do, and that type of thing.
Sure. Yeah. We say NOHVCC a lot because the full name is quite a mouthful. But we're a nonprofit organization committed to creating a positive future for OHV recreation. And we do that a few ways. We focus on education. We focus on bringing enthusiasts together to create clubs or to make the club stronger. We also work with clubs to create associations and states. Effectively, what we try to do is bring together what we call grass tops enthusiasts. So club leaders like presidents and treasurers and secretaries and heavily engaged enthusiasts. And we do that by having what we call state partners. And a state partner like yourself, Matt, is somebody in any given state who we view as a leader who's can tap into what's going on with the OHV enthusiasts in that state. And we use them as a conduit for information, both to enthusiasts and from enthusiasts to us. And we create educational materials. We have our adventure trail program geared at kids. And effectively, what we're doing is bringing together OHV enthusiasts across all the disparate ways people might use a motorized vehicle to access the off-road, dirt bikes, ATVs, side-by-sides, four-wheel drive, and anything else, and try to get them to work together so that they can become the people responsible for education, for making sure people operate their vehicles safely and responsibly, for ensuring that the proper discussions happen with land managers to ensure that there's more and better use and that we're having sustainable trails and we're having trails that are fun. And NOHVCC also works on the ground doing trail layout design and other projects, working with land managers at the federal, state agencies and sometimes private land managers as well. But Mark's way more versed on that side of things. So if he wants to say a few words, I'd love to hear him say them.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark. Jump in.
Yeah, myself and Jeff Chain, our project manager here at NOHVCC, we get to do the fun stuff, and we let Dwayne do the political stuff and the phone calls. And we go out and stir the dirt and work on trail layout design, manage projects. A lot of what we do is teaching educational workshops to enthusiasts and land managers on how to properly build OHV trails. And that's not only a great way to educate them and make sure we get sustainable, fun trails, but also to create networking among OHV enthusiasts across the country and different land managers. So I've got what you can say is pretty much a dream job, either out playing on trails or working at my house and talking to people about trails.
Is your arm bruised from yourself, like pinching yourself every morning when you wake up?
No, but it is bruised from my wife beating me for talking about how good my job is.
So, Mark, you're program director, and you said you kind of get out and build trails. Now, you're stationed out west. Is that correct?
Yeah, Matt, I'm out in Washington State, actually, in the eastern part of Washington, pretty close to Idaho.
Okay. So, do you do a lot of projects out that way, or are you primarily, West Coast? Do you do anything East Coast, or just stay on that side?
Oh, no, we do projects all over. We're heading to Alabama here in a few weeks to do a workshop work with some of the Conservation Corps employees on, how to build OHV trails. We'll go to Utah here in a couple of weeks, in Arizona, but we're open to wherever the work is, and wherever people have the interest. Have clinometer, will travel.
So my question is, where do I send my resume?
Is that trailhead at NOHVCC.org?
Yeah, I'll be glad to go out there and do something.
Well, I tell you, I've seen videos of you guys, and when I was out at the workshop in Reno, what was that, in 2019? And that you guys are no joke. I mean, that's some serious. I mean, you guys are putting in some sweat equity for sure. How many projects you guys got going on at one time, you think?
Oh, I think we usually keep about 4 or 5 on the burner at a time, including workshops and like 1 or 2, actual on the ground projects. Those tend to be pretty big and take up a lot of time and funding, and typically are funded by grants, which you guys know it takes a lot of time and management there. So we're a staff of 4, and we take pride in the amount we get done with our limited staff. And, we think we're able to cover a lot of ground and do a lot of neat things.
So, I've heard you say that you're putting on these workshops, which sounds like clubs, people building some trails. So how much education do you do to government, to the representatives and stuff that we're having a difficult time to get and to understand, that we can do this, we can do it good, we can do it safe, we can do it, friendly. How much time do you spend in that?
A lot.
Slow learners, or
we weigh one side heavier than the other. It's got to be a partnership, and the ideal workshop's got members of the land management agency as well as the local clubs and enthusiasts. It gives them a good neutral zone spot to communicate, share what things look like from their side, some of the obstacles both sides have to overcome, and how they can work together to make those things work. It's more than anything, we're talking about trails, but in reality, we're building that partnership and networking that NOHVCC was founded to develop. And that's what we really want people to leave with. We want them to take home, the great trails information and apply it. But the best thing we can do is get people talking and working together.
Now, do you find when you're working with the BLM land management people or other forestry or whatever, do you find very many of those that are ATV motorcycle enthusiasts, or are they basically there to do a job and they're really not into the sport?
I can say we found a few, and we're lucky because Mark's created a couple too.
That's good.
Nice.
I've met a lot of people that have never touched an ATV before they went to work for an agency, and they get to really love it as part of their job. And then they end up buying one to have for themselves to go out on the weekends. And, I think it's a really cool thing and something that we encourage because we're bringing more people into our sport. And then they, as managers, have a better idea of what you guys are looking for in trails and the experiences that you want. So we get past that myth that a trail is a trail is a trail, and that there aren't any differences between like a 2-track trail and a single-track trail that are fun.
Yeah, it's all about perspective. When you actually ride, you gain a perspective. That's a lot of, like, for us here in Toledo. That's why we kind of started the Toledo Trail Riders, because our local forest managers, they don't ride, and they didn't have an understanding of really speed and all that kind of thing. And that's kind of where we got involved, and it makes a huge difference. So let's kind of dive a little deeper into your own, both your roles. How did Dwayne, we'll start with you. Have you been a trail rider yourself, or did you grow up riding or racing, or how'd you kind of get into the role?
Yeah. So I was primarily a street rider and had bikes for most of my life at some point, scooters at first, and then got into the bigger street motorcycles, and did that for a long time. Did lots of trips. And then I ended up working for the Motorcycle Industry Council and for quite a few years. And through that, I got introduced to a little bit more of the off-highway side of things and really enjoyed it. I still consider, I still watch more MotoGP than motocross, which breaks Mark's heart. But nevertheless, I really enjoy getting out in the dirt as well.
Cool. What about you, Mark?
I started riding a JR50 when I was 4 years old. My grandfather started the Brush Bunch Motorcycle Club out here in 1970. So I grew up riding with that club. Didn't ever think that I could make a career out of it. I just knew it was fun. But I started working as a trail ranger with Idaho Parks and Rec back in the early 2000s, and eventually worked way on full time there. Later at the New Mexico Off-Highway Vehicle Program, and then I conned Russ Enos, the executive director before Dwayne, to hire me. And luckily, Dwayne hasn't found a way to get rid of me yet.
Well, that's good. It sounds like you got some job security there. So, what Dwayne, your role? I think Mark actually mentioned the political side of everything. Have you seen that you guys gaining traction? I'm sure it depends on the area and in the state and whatnot, but are you guys gaining traction that way?
Well, when I mentioned I worked for the Motorcycle Industry Council, and when I did, I was based in Washington, D.C., and I did lobbying. And the role here at NOHVCC is a little different in that, as the 501c3 nonprofit, we don't do as much lobbying. But I can say there are some ways that I see the tide is turning a bit, and that makes me pretty happy. And that's with the disparate recreational groups. I still think there's room to improve, but I see more cooperation amongst non-motorized users, recreationists, and motorized recreationists than I've ever seen. And the trend is in the right direction. And I think that is being reflected when we go to workshops and meet with land managers, or we do our BLM action plan listening sessions in individual states. We find that land managers are recognizing that maybe there's a chance that collaboration can work, and that if you get the right people, the right representatives, people like Matt, in the room and having the right conversation, then there is a chance that everybody can get some of what they want. And so that's the tide that's turned that makes me most hopeful. Because I do believe that, there are opportunities to get out and recreate and fish and hike and hunt and rock climb and mountain bike. And yeah, there's room for off-highway vehicle use as well. But if we recognize that we're all in this together, we'll come up with better outcomes and less conflict. And it's something that I'm really heartened to see beginning to happen.
If you could boil it down, what do you think is probably one of the biggest hurdles you have to get things accomplished? As far as, we're talking with the government officials, what is one of the biggest hurdles you have to overcome to start getting the people to recognize, like you said, that we can work together?
Well, I think, we touched on it a bit. It's a lack of understanding. They don't, those who have, a limited relationship with our sport view it sometimes as daredevil risk takers who are wreaking havoc on the environment. I think when we get a chance to have the responsible enthusiast in front of them and explain what they want to do, and that they take their families, and that they also love to find a scenic viewpoint and camp and have a good time and see what we're really about at that level, I think that's when that works. And Mark talked about it a bit when he was talking about our Great Trails workshop, where we bring together OHV enthusiasts and land managers alike. And I think it's important for OHV enthusiasts to understand what the land manager is up against, right? They can't just wave a wand and do whatever they want either. And I think when you build those relationships, and when both sides understand what's really important to both sides and the hurdles that both sides have to overcome, that's when you can have success. So I think it's just what we've been discussing, that barrier to entry. There's always going to be people who will never change their mind on our side and any other side. But the vast majority of people, if you can have a relationship that's genuine, and you can have an understanding of what the other side is really looking for and can possibly provide, then you're going to end up with better outcomes.
Yeah, you hit the key word that I was thinking about earlier, was relationship. Because I know for personally with our system here, if we didn't have a great relationship with our land manager, Don, there's no way we would have single track on the ground. I mean, our relationship is so strong. They, believe it or not, they actually asked us if we wanted more single track. I about fell out of the van when he told me that. You know, I'm like, are you kidding me? 10 years ago was never even thought it was possible. But what about advice to the riders? Because I think the misnomer is, and Marty's on our board, with the Toledo Trail Riders, but so he kind of sees the ins and outs of a lot of stuff. And, you've ridden a lot out west, but what is advice to the riders? Because I think sometimes the misnomer, the assumption is, oh, this trail just magically appears and they talked about it in a conference and all of a sudden here it is. But what can you advise the riders that maybe aren't in clubs to do as far as trying to be responsible and try to better the image of our sport?
I know Mark will have some ideas on this as well, but first and foremost, ride safely and responsibly. Wear the appropriate gear. Stay on the designated trails. If you see a fellow rider, talk to them. Understand that this is a community, and when we're out riding, we love to be around other people who like to ride, and we can have conversations. And I think through that we can better understand each other, and as enthusiasts, do what we need to do to ensure not only that we maintain our trails, but something that's very important to me, and that's the safety and also keeping the trail sustainable. I would also say you asked for the one thing that enthusiasts would do, and it's patient. We see a lot of new entrants into the advocacy area or to, getting involved in OHV advocacy, I guess is the right word. And they flame out quick because they go hard and they see success stories, but they only see the last year of the success story. And if you really want lots of new single track, that relationship we were just talking about didn't develop in 3 weeks, right?
No.
It takes time. It takes patience. It takes a little bit of banging your head against the wall. And that's a great reason to come to NOHVC's conference or to join a club like yours, because you can commiserate with one another and you can sort of celebrate incremental baby steps as opposed to expecting to take the whole, all of it at once. And so patience would be mine, but I'm sure Mark has that.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I think Dwayne hit on the important one there at the end is if you're not in a club, join a club. That's a direct channel to land managers to get correct information on what's going on about the ground, out on the ground. Internet forums that can have all sorts of different information on there can really get you into trouble. Join a club. It's still a great way to communicate with the land managers, find out about volunteer projects, and just be involved with your sport and, be in the driver's seat of the future of your recreation rather than sitting back and waiting for things to happen to you. The next thing is sound. Sound is the number one killer for us. Going after that loud pipe is, you may think it sounds cool, but it's the thing we get beat up on more than anything else from the sport. So, pay attention to local sound limits, keep your machine quiet. They've made a lot of advances to where you can have horsepower and not have a super loud machine. And I think that's pretty important. And I think the last thing that we really need to think about as riders goes beyond the riding is that we need to be involved. We don't show up near as well as the people who don't like motorized recreation.
Yes.
We get beat on travel plans and collaboratives because there's people that live to show up to those meetings. They are involved. They are the squeaky wheel, and they tend to get what they want. Again, that's, taking the driver's seat, controlling your destiny and deciding what your trails are going to look like in the future rather than having somebody decide for you. And, it's not as fun as riding or even going out and do a trail work day, but it's a very necessary part of the process.
Well, go ahead, Marty.
No, I just was going to mention, because I liked, he brought up sound. So a couple of years ago, I was at a dealer meeting, and we were talking about the new mufflers, that's coming out, new exhaust system that they were bringing out for the new, at that point in 2019 KTMs. And the gentleman that was from, a exhaust manufacturer said it's getting harder and harder because the manufacturers now are building exhaust that are as good as aftermarket exhaust. So, and they're building them, and they are building them in, in the being quiet, like you said. So a lot of stuff's coming through. So we think we need lots of noise, but a lot of times that's all it gets you is noise. It doesn't get you any more performance because the dealer or the manufacturers built that engine, built that exhaust exactly to get as much as they can out of the thing. So it's really funny. We all think we got to go out and spend $1,000 for new exhaust when we get the new bike, but realistically, the stuff coming on it is good. And for performance wise, anyway, might not be as loud, but it does. So yeah, it's, pretty easy to stay within the noise limit and still have performance.
Yeah, it's a great point. And if I may, it hits back onto something we were discussing earlier, where we're viewed by our most negative tendencies by people who are unaware of what our sport's about. If you're out there with loud pipes, you will be remembered in a negative way by someone who hears you who doesn't want to. If you share pictures or videos on your social media or club site that show significant resource damage, unruly behavior or not wearing safety gear, that is what forms the negative opinion before we walk in the room. So another great thing enthusiasts can do is not only ride safe and responsible for the reasons they should, but also because if someone sees you do something you shouldn't be doing, you created a negative stereotype in their minds. And that person might be a decision maker or a land manager. And we're going to have a tougher time creating that great relationship like you had with your land manager, Matt, moving forward, just because first impressions count.
I like that. So last year we took part of the year and actually ran a track that was not going to be open out here due to COVID. And the operator wasn't going to be able to get it open, so we ran it. And just like you said, the social media is such a huge thing anymore. The health department didn't even show up at the track to see how we operated. They waited till we ran. The people that were there and raced, they waited till the social media come out and they looked at all the pictures and all the comments and all that kind of stuff on all these different individuals that posted pictures and looked at what happened, what they said, what their comments were. Did they have a mask? Did they have a mask? So that's what they looked at. They didn't really come out and say, okay, well, 6 people out of the 500 people were there. You got some pictures, didn't have a mask on. They just saw 6 pictures and, well, nobody's got a mask, So that, like you said, social media is really tough because it sometimes can show only one side of a very little side sometimes of it. But people, like you said, they take it as gospel.
Yeah. And, we're all, fallible. We're all going to make mistakes, and getting that captured at the snap of a button on a phone has a lasting impact. So the best advice I have is be vigilant and do the right thing, and you won't get caught doing the wrong thing. And if we slip up, let's make amends. Otherwise, we could be losing opportunities for those relationships that are so critical just based on a moment's, a bad timing.
Absolutely. I remember one time we had an open house down the road here, and a local citizen was having a major issue with a proposal of the trails expanding. And the first thing she said was, you're going to wreck the deer hunting. And I said, ma'am, I said, let's look at the big picture. And we talked very cordial. And by the end of it, we basically had her understanding that it's okay. It's not, because she didn't understand she could hunt at 15 different places within the same area. We get this little piece of the pie, and they get the whole big pie. And, but I just remember her saying about the noise, and I'm like, ma'am, every enduro I've ever raced, we go right by tree stands. That's not a coincidence, but so sometimes you got to take advantage of the situation and kind of turn it around. Have you guys been in a lot of them situations with maybe environmentalists and that kind of thing?
There's misconceptions at a lot of levels. We hold a lot of meetings with, folks that, just don't have an appreciation for the sport. And they just don't understand what the users are looking for. And in turn, sometimes our riders don't understand what's important to those folks on the other side. And, having that meeting, that sit down or that workshop to get those points across is pretty huge. Just like we talked about earlier, misconception that we hear a lot is a trail is a trail is a trail. That anybody with an OHV is happy riding down an old flat logging road. and not understanding, the challenge and features that people are looking for. And that's something that we've been pretty lucky to carry that message and find ways to make trails fun, but also make them sustainable and ensure that resource protection land managers are looking for. I think that's a lot of our job, whether it's, the trail workshops or on the ground layout projects, is working through some of those misconceptions and miscommunications on both sides and finding solutions that make both sides equally angry. We're never going to make everyone happy, but if we can make them both angry, I think we're doing all right.
Right.
It's like every fall, I think there's a lot of people that wish that motor vehicle noise would scare deer away. Yeah. How many deer? I grew up in the hills of Pennsylvania, and when we'd take a ride as a family, and what we'd do is there was just one road. It was a fairly busy road. We'd take it down because we could count the deer on the side of the road. It was easy. They were right there, So the vehicle noise didn't do a lot of damage to those deer because they were stood there and watched us go by if we even bother them. But
a lot of people use their ATVs to go hunting, and it's a great, UTVs as well, throw the harvest the animal and get them in the back of the UTV. But so Dwayne, do you have any other additional roles at NOHVC that besides executive director, which is you kind of oversee the whole thing, but how long you been executive director?
I took over June of 2017. So coming up on 4 years now. And it's been great. As executive director, responsible for dealing with the board, for budgets, for expense reports, for signing contracts, all the day-to-day stuff. And honestly, my true goal is to stay out of the way. The staff is tremendous. You got Mark with you. We also have Jeff Chain and Laura Feist. And this is the proudest part of the job for me because I always get to say that I believe we have two of the best trail layout and design and project managers in terms of OHV stuff in the world. And I get to send Mark and Jeff out to do what they do. And I basically sit back comfortable knowing that we're going to do a great job. And of course, we'll make mistakes like everybody else, but the staff relationships are so strong that we work through everything. And I'm just delighted to be able to be at the helm and let the experts like Mark and Jeff do what they do.
Nice. I tell you, so I was out in Reno in 2019 for the NOHVC conference, and it really was more of a, obviously learned a lot, right? You had the workshop, you're not the workshop, but you had educational seminars and a lot of guest speakers and things. But what I found comforting to me was like, okay, you're not alone, right? You're not alone in this whole trail advocacy world. There's other people like us that really try hard, and you're volunteering. None of us get really paid for this kind of thing. So
what?
Oh, you didn't get the check, Marty? As a volunteer?
I was still waiting for my my check from the club. Wow.
I haven't gotten mine yet either. Okay. If you get yours, let me know.
I will.
Yeah, let me know. But anyway, it's, I guess it's comforting to know that there's other people across the country that you really care about, doing the right thing, getting trails on the ground and maintaining those relationships. And, to hear you say, Dwayne, that the dynamic between, all trail users, whether you're bridle, your mountain bike, that dynamic is getting better. That might be the greatest thing I've heard, recently with the trail advocacy side. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's been a few things that have happened, and it's very, I don't want to say that we're finished on any side because we could all do better, but I have seen improvement, particularly with the national groups. There's an organization I'm on the board called the Coalition for Recreational Trails, and that group supports the Recreational Trails Program, which of course provides quite a bit of funding all across America for OHV and non-motorized recreational trails. And that sort of it's been around a long time, CRT, but that sort of kicked off what I think has been happening in the last 3 to 4 years. We were able to work together, and RTP is the perfect program to bring the other groups together because all of the disparate uses can benefit from the funding. We can all work together. And we sort of learned that we could all pull in the same direction on RTP while maybe having some different views on other things that were happening. particularly in Washington, D.C. at the time. So we created some good relationships there. And then there's the creation of the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, which are the trade groups, trade associations for national disparate industries related to recreation, both motorized and non. And they've really started working together and recognized that while there are some micro issues we're going to continue to disagree on, there are a lot of macro issues that create the rising tide, lift all boats, more money for trails, a greater emphasis on using forest and BLM and parks land for recreation. Historically, Forest Service was timber, right? But that's changed. And recreation can be a valuable economic driver in rural communities, particularly. So I just think there's been this, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Mike Passo from American Trails. He's the executive director there, and he's working really hard to put together a national group called Trails Move People, which again is just a disparate actual trail users getting together and saying, hey, we all use trails. And even if you're a fisherman and you hike down, 100 yards down a trail to go fishing, you use trails, and we need your input, and we need the motorcycle guys' input and the horseback riders' guys' input and gals. And I've seen it come together, and it's something I'm proud of. And I'm proud of a big cross section of the OHV enthusiast community for being willing to take it on, because 15, 20 years ago, it was an us versus them, and they would never want anything that was good for us, and we would never want anything that's good for them. And like I said, there's ground to be gained yet, but I'm happy about the direction we're headed.
Right. Can you explain a little bit more, going in depth for those that don't know about RTP, how the funding works? Just because I think a lot of people think that you just click your fingers and there's the money. Can you kind of give us a little brief overview of that?
Sure. It's intended to be tied to the fuel taxes you pay at the pump. So if you fill up your road-going vehicle or your ATV or your snowmobile with gas, you're paying the same tax. So that tax is used typically to fund roads and bridges and other infrastructure that are associated with, the fuel tax. However, we know that a portion of the taxes collected is going into that ATV, is going into that dirt bike, ROV, snowmobile, and full-size four-wheel drive vehicles that are going to be used off-road. So in 1991, there was legislation that was designed to get some of that money and basically pay for play, right? We're filling up our gas tanks. We're paying that gas tax. Let's get some of that money back. And what has happened is, I think at this point, there's roughly $85 million a year set aside for the recreational trails program. That money is then doled out to the states through a formula, which is the 50 states get an equal portion of half of it. And then the other half is divvied up based on a study on the amount of trail use in those states. And then the states are responsible for administering the program and collecting the grant nominations and then approving them. And the other big caveat is 30% of the funding at the grant level is designated for motorized use, 30% for non-motorized use, and the remaining 40% is for mixed use, which does not have to include motorized. So if you had a hiking trail that also was an equestrian trail, that could be mixed use. And it's really been an incredible program that has funded some of the best projects. And, I heard somebody in Michigan once saying, I don't know if this still holds true, but that there's probably not a bridge on an OHV trail in Michigan that wasn't built in part, at least in part, using some RTP funds. So it's critically important to us. And the Coalition for Recreational Trails, who I mentioned earlier, is working hard on not only preserving that program, but growing it. And we've actually made progress in the last couple of years. And, given the uncertain financial times, who knows? But we think we're going to be able to hopefully get more money returned to the recreational trails program based on the fact that we're going to do a study and find out exactly how much gas is being collected in ATVs, dirt bikes, snowmobiles, and full-size four-wheel drive vehicles. And we think it's going to be bigger than the number that we've been getting.
Is there a set amount each year? Like if you don't use it, you're going to lose it type of thing?
There are some variations and rules by states. It's not typically use or lose, although I think most states try to do it that way. There is some ability to carry over big projects over several funding years in some states. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. But my recommendation is, if you're unfamiliar with recreational trails program, visit the it's administered by the Federal Highway Administration. So go to the FHWA site, look up recreational trails program. You'll get a sense for what it does. And it could very well lead to some funding in your state or area for trail maintenance, for education, for trail construction. It's really quite broad, and it's been very valuable to our sport since 1991. Is that 30 years? Wow.
Yeah. Wow. 30. Yeah. Almost. Yeah, exactly 30 years. Go ahead, Marty.
Can I jump back a little bit? You were talking about, multi-uses on trails, and we're a horse. My family's a horse people too. We have horses, and I think here, I've been in Arizona, and it's in places where you see a little bit more head-to-head issues with mountain bikes and horse and motorized vehicles on trails, where I think we've been shielded a little bit here in Ohio, because here in Ohio, we've been sort of fortunate. We have the Maumee State Forest over here that is primarily hunting and off-road. And then just a few more miles, you have the Metro Parks, which is 6,500 acres, I believe, that have horse trails. So we've never really had to intermingle here in Ohio. So people here, I think, is shielded a little bit from that controversy of, having to, deal with the horse and the bikes and all that kind of stuff on it now. Now you do start seeing some mountain bikes in that area now, but, it's just getting, more popular. But the Metro Parks has just sort of shielded us with that a little bit more, because they've put in a ton of trails. So, here in Ohio, we have sort of the best, although we don't have a lot of riding area, we do have sort of the best scenario is everybody has got a great,
a little bit of everything,
great facilities to do whatever they do. Speaking back in Arizona, I was in Arizona for many years, and that's, was such a big deal. Trails that we had used for years and years. The horse people, including me, what better horse trail than a nice dirt bike trail? They got it. I don't have to worry about cactuses usually in the road and that kind of stuff. And it's usually the most scenic ride. So, now you have that, here comes motorcycles, and people aren't usually expecting horses in the middle of the trail, or we're riding and, you're coming across bikes. So again, Ohio is a little bit shielded, so a lot of people here locally really don't know that that's a lot of things you guys have to deal with in a lot of other areas.
Yeah, it's definitely can be an issue, conflict. And, first and foremost, any enthusiast, motorized or non, or recreationist that's going out to recreate, we can go a long way towards mitigating these problems by treating others how we'd like to be treated ourselves, and not have knee-jerk reactions. You don't belong on this trail. Instead, let's try to talk it out, and we can mitigate a lot of those problems. And there are also ways managers can mitigate problems. And Mark's probably the expert on this in terms of dispersing use, setting education, and that sort of thing. So, Mark, you want to hit that?
Yeah, I think the most key thing is what you hit on there, Dwayne, is setting expectations when you go to a trail system. If you show up and think you're going to have a totally non-motorized day, and then there's dirt bikes coming past, it can put people on the wrong foot, and at no fault to that non-motorized person or to the dirt bike riders. Educating users on what they can expect when they get to the trail system through social media, through good websites, through maps, is pretty key. People do better when they know what to expect when they get out there, and that's really key. And the other thing, and I think is important, is the continued collaboration and cooperation among the user groups, and working together to provide experiences that everybody can like, and everybody can enjoy.
So what you talked about doing something down in Arizona. What and where are you doing? You down in the Arizona area here?
We're working with a couple forests down there, Tonto, the Coconino, and the Prescott, on different projects. The Prescott and the Coconino are layout and design projects, and the Tonto is more of a management plan right now, but I think we're going to help with some design here in the near future.
So like in Prescott area, are you going to take existing trails and make them safer, make them more user friendly type deals, so more riders, or are you actually building new trails? or designing new trails?
The land manager is adopting some of the existing trails, and then Jeff and I have helped. Mostly Jeff have helped design some new single track down there that I think we finally got art clearance. So hopefully it will be built in the next year or so, which I think are going to be really fun and add to what's already a really cool area. On the Coconino, same thing. We're creating proposals for expanding a pretty big loop. And then on the Tonto, they've got a lot of stuff that's really close to like Scottsdale, Phoenix. So you get a lot of people out there, and they're working on more of the management side right now. And once they get their travel plan in place, we'll see some more design factors there.
Well, we want to thank you, because I personally utilize the Prescott area for sure for a lot of good trails and some very beautiful trails, great country. And then we also use the Carefree area. That's, sort of home base area out there when we go to Arizona. So really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Been enjoying that since about 1982. So seeing a lot of things change and a lot of things go away because of homes getting closer and closer out there. But thanks again for your support out there. I know that's a lot of great riding. I personally enjoy that majorly. So
what do you guys, as far as like your current with the COVID situation, how has that kind of impacted you guys?
Well, it's impacted us in some pretty significant ways, which is probably relatable to almost everyone. We did not have our annual conference last year. It was scheduled for August in Knoxville, Tennessee. But we're trying again this year. If we can, if everything moves forward with the vaccinations and the pandemic's under control, we're going to try to get together in Knoxville. And of course, both of you are invited. So that's a big public facing one. It initially really ramped up our webinar activities. We provide webinars to try to do them monthly. And initially they were really well attended and people were anxious for any kind of material. But I think there's probably been some fatigue there with people, Zoom calls like this one. They're really great, but they don't trump getting outside. And so, yeah, it's impacted us. And we've had fewer great trails workshops. It's delayed implementation of some other programs that we were hoping to get off the ground and running. It's changed the way we sort of viewed our short-term goals and what we want to accomplish with employees and projects and programs. But on the other hand, NOHVCC is alive and well, and we've been able, through mostly Mark and Jeff's hard work, to secure some grant funding. We've continued to get funding from the industry, MIC, SBIA, and ROVA, and we look forward to that continuing. So we're going to be here for a while, and things might continue to be a little less than what we would have considered normal before March of 2020. But we're going to find ways. And as Mark mentioned earlier, he and Jeff are headed to Alabama here soon, and they're going to do some workshops. We're going to do some workshops in Arizona and Utah. And the guys are going to have everybody in their masks and socially distance and following all the applicable state restrictions. But I think there's a real pent-up need for folks to get out there and do these things. So we're hopeful to be able to meet those needs.
Well, we being Marty and I, started this podcast because of the pandemic, mainly because we were bored. It's like, you can't, they had our local state forest, they had it open, and then the decision makers, so what they do, they make decisions and they shut it down. And so that started a lot of, what would you say, Marty, in a polite way, drama?
A lot of drama.
Chaos, a lot of stuff. Yeah. Again, going back to social media. People, up in arms, and they were going to storm the forest, and just all kinds of stuff. And so we decided, okay, let's talk about it, because we were bored, and what else are you going to do? And but I think it's been a valuable thing to kind of be able to, now it's like, okay, that's cool. We get to talk to guys like you, and our audience gets to understand a little bit more about the whole other world of trail advocacy, because again, I think people don't realize all the work like you guys are doing, out there. But like I said, I just think it's really great what you guys are doing across the country. So one question real quick, have you guys had a lot of stumbling blocks because of you know, you mentioned things kind of slow down a little bit, Dwayne, but have you had a lot of projects fizzle out because of the COVID?
And quickly, no, we haven't had them fizzle. We've had delays. We've had stops and starts. We've had changing the way we engage. But I think there's still, everybody has this expectation. Well, we've seen what's happened during the pandemic, which may have been counterintuitive. And that's the huge growth of people wanting to get outdoors for all sorts of recreation. And that's also translated to OHV recreation. And we've seen increased sales of dirt bikes and ATVs and other vehicles. And we see people getting out there, and we're hearing about the growing pains from that. That in fact might be a stumbling block that we should mention. We're getting a lot of new users out there. We're getting a lot of people renting and trying to decide if they want to buy their own machines. And they're getting out there and they want to do the right thing, I'm sure. But there is a huge need for education and letting folks know, particularly with the ROV or UTV, it's very easy to sit in one of those machines and think, oh, this has a steering wheel and a brake and a gas pedal, just like my passenger vehicle. And so it's going to be the same. It's not. It's got different capabilities, built for a different purpose. And there are different, strategies to mitigate any negative impacts. So we really need to reach these people, and we really need to help them understand what the OHV community writ large has known for a long time. And that's, if you operate safely and responsibly, you're going to have a place to ride for a long time. And if you come out here and you do the wrong thing, you could jeopardize the opportunity for a lot of other people. And even perhaps more importantly, you're going to cause resource damage or get yourself injured. And we want to avoid that at all.
What happened to, now this is back in the 80s, so mid 80s or so, I, helped in Arizona when they started requiring, three-wheeler safety. So if you purchased anything, a three-wheeler, you needed to pass, if you're a certain ages or whatever, you had to pass the safety deal. And they used to provide that, we did it in a dealer parking lot, and help do the safety. What happened? It seemed like that program sort of fell apart, and I don't know if there's still anything like that anymore, because, that's a huge concern of mine. Drive down the road from our house, and you see this 9-year-old on this, Honda Foreman or, one of these things that probably weighs 1,000 pounds, and it's a 1,000, a huge 4x4, side-by-side type thing, or I shouldn't say even, ATV,
yeah.
And you're looking at it thinking, you're shaking your head. At what point did anybody ever run through some things that they realized that this young child is nothing, is on the back of a wild stallion, which they don't realize?
Yeah, no, some of those safety or similar safety programs continue to exist. The ATV Safety Institute continues to offer ATV safety training. And on ATVs, manufacturers continue to offer free training for purchasers of new vehicles and their families. So look up the ATV Safety Institute and you can get all that information. ROVA has something similar. They have hands-on training as well for purchasers of ROVs or anybody who wants to learn how to operate them safely. Again, that's rohva.org, I believe, if you want to find out about that safety training. And they do have, both of them have some online components where you can, if you're an avid rider, you're probably not, it'll be a brusher up course for you. But if you're somebody who's looking to get into the sport, it'd be a great opportunity for you to understand the differences between these vehicles and your passenger vehicles. So yeah, it continues to exist. But primarily, we need to understand that those of us who've been around the sport for a long time, we understand what these vehicles are. And they're just that, they're vehicles, they're not toys. And we need to if we have an opportunity to provide education to anyone who doesn't understand what these vehicles are capable of and might think it's okay to put a really young person on a really big machine, it's not. There can be catastrophic consequences. And we all need to do a better job at this for all of our, no matter what our pursuits are, because, right there on the machine are going to be stickers saying this vehicle, is not meant for this age person, and it could cost a life or a serious injury. Let's follow them. The manufacturers put those on there.
So there's nothing mandatory. It's not like having to have, do the boat safety. You have to pass boat safety. That's pretty common all out here, but really, so it sort of missed the off-road, I guess. Actually back in the 80s, it was mandatory to have that that certificate or whatever it is to be riding that. But so there's no mandatory anymore. So I'm assuming.
It depends what state you're in, Marty.
Okay.
Some states do have mandatory training requirements, like Oregon and I believe Utah, because they were really early adopters of OHV tourism as an economic driver, and they've had pretty long-standing education requirements and some pretty solid programs. But it's not a national requirement or anything. But it is highly recommended.
Absolutely. So I guess the other thing I had, not to monopolize it here, but
no, go for it.
The other thing that you hear a lot. I know I grew up in Pennsylvania, and was very fortunate to grow up in a time that we could ride all the state forests and the logging roads and all that kind of stuff, and even the county dirt roads. But since then that has stopped. And, you talk to, I still get back out there. It's, like I said, that's where I grew up. And, what you hear a lot is one of the, I don't want to say arguments, but one of the reasons that they want to say they can't expand on trails or they can't help build this is because they don't have anybody to police it. They don't have anybody to watch what's going on. So, do you hear that often? You hear, as that being a little bit of a hurdle that people throw out there as an excuse why they don't want to expand or create some of this trails?
Absolutely. And Mark, why don't you take this one? I'm sure you'll knock it out.
Right. Enforcement is definitely underfunded on the recreation front. You usually get one or two people to patrol millions of acres of land across the country. And it's unfortunate because good riders, responsible riders, they want enforcement. They feel reassured by seeing, agency personnel out there checking stickers and sound. And they feel pretty good to go show somebody that they're compliant and doing things the right way. We see a lot of people asking for more enforcement, because they don't want to take the blame for the bad actors. They want to have people out there seeing that it's actually a minority of us out there riding that are causing problems. And, I think the agency would love to provide it, but, again, until more of the focus is shifted towards recreation as a primary focus of those agencies, they're not going to get more resources for enforcement. However, a lot of them have partnered really well with local clubs, such as ambassador groups that can do some patrolling and education, not conflict, not enforcement, but just pure education to help people know how to do the right thing. And, Dwayne said earlier, if we see new riders out there doing things we know they're not supposed to, it's a good chance for us to provide peer education. We're not condoning anybody doing enforcement or confrontation, but if you can have a chance to have a friendly conversation, that's a big opportunity that you just can't waste.
I think, in a lot of conversations when us guys are sitting around having lunch from a long ride or whatever we talk about is that, my bike sometimes, because I don't travel as much as I have in the last, 15 years, but, my bike looks like one of those campers with a sticker from every state on it, because in my mind that, yes, I can have a sticker from Ohio, and a lot of times states out there will allow you to ride it, and do that. But my thought is that sticker money in that state is also going to provide trails and that kind of stuff. So we've always, as far as our group, our family and stuff, we've always made a point to register, to sticker in whatever state we're in and ride. And even if we're there for just a few days, just to help that. And so, sometimes that conversation goes that I know Michigan now, you're required 2 different stickers,
right? Yep.
So the prices are getting up there. And I think, a lot of what you hear people concerned, and they don't know all the, behind the stories, but you're starting to spend $75 or $80 or whatever it is a year to sticker your bike. And, and then the guys, like you said, that have been riding that, really want to keep the trails around, start wondering, hey, we're giving them the money, and yes, the trails are being maintained, but where is the enforcement? What do we got to do to make sure somewhere this money for enforcement's getting there, So what kind of, I guess light would you shine on, paying the fees on your, your stickers and stuff for the different states on, does that get used? Because that's the biggest thing is, we pay all this money, but is it really being used for off-road?
Yeah, I'm smiling because this little bit of discussion sort of sums up the broader discussion we've been having the whole time. So if you're an OHV enthusiast who's been engaged for a long time and you took Mark's advice and you showed up, and you took my advice and you had patience and you followed Matt's lead and developed a good relationship with your land manager, and you ended up with a great trail system, you are going to want enforcement against anybody who jeopardizes all that hard work and effort. And you're going to want a source of funding to pay for improvements, continued maintenance, additional trails. So you're going to be happy to pay a reasonable fee for a sticker for a OHV program. So I just thought it was interesting the way that tied everything together. But yeah, I think there are always ups and downs, and Mark may have more insight on this, but in most states, I believe the OHV sticker funds are well intentioned and doing good things. And there's always whenever there's money lying around, there's going to be somebody that tries to take it in a different direction, and we fight that quite a bit. But I think for the most part, OHV users are getting a good deal. Mark, do you feel differently?
No, I mean, anytime somebody comes after an OHV fund, OHV users are ferocious. And, there's been some sweeps, but I've seen some really impressive public campaigns to protect their funds. Most of the OHV legislation that sets up, sticker or permits is written pretty well to protect those funds. And, people watch that part very doggedly. And, that's something else that people have done to get their own enforcement is actually change their legislation so that they can make sure that a portion of their sticker goes to enforcement, whether that's county sheriffs or game and fish or whoever that might be. But that's a user action that's been taken because they heard the complaint that, the OHV guys are going wild and nobody's watching them. So in a couple particular states, they said, all right, well, let's make sure our sticker money's going to enforcement. And, they've taken care of that themselves so they can, again, not only take that responsibility, but also then they get some data and metrics to show that sometimes problems aren't exactly what they're made out to be when people are upset.
Well, thanks, because I think that's going to make a lot of people, even the club wise, to realize that our sticker money, because you hear people, I'm paying $35 or whatever it may be, and hopefully it goes to whatever, so that's great to hear that, you guys' take on that and what's really happening.
What's funny there, Marty, is that most of us are spending $10,000 plus on a new bike. And then we buy, another $1,000 worth of gear, but then we want to complain about a $15 trail pass. It seems a little crazy to me. Most of the OHV programs are really well intentioned and get that money back on the ground. And it's often a better investment than some of the jerseys I've torn in one ride.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That helmet that you dropped the first time before you even wear it. Yeah, it's a $600 helmet. So I guess I was going to ask you too. So on the grant side of life, are we able to go after grant money to help enforcement? Is that a part of that? Is that something doable that if somebody wanted to try to help, and try to point somebody in a direction to get grant money to help enforcement, can that be used for that?
Yeah, it depends on your state, what your legislation says, what your program that administers your grant program says, but there are often allowable uses for enforcement, whether that be time or equipment to get them out there. We see a lot of that. I know a couple of the manufacturers actually offer grants to help get enforcement equipment so they can be out. And they also help with like emergency services so they can get in the backcountry and help people get what they need. And we got dogs going crazy in the background.
I think he's trying to escape, Mark.
Yes. He wants to be in there. He's got something he's got to say.
That was great. That was great from my
the wife and the kids just pulled in the driveway and the dog sits in the window whenever they do that. So.
Good guard dog.
Yeah.
If I may, there's a point I'd love to draw out about enforcement, and I think Mark's the one to make it, and that's what enforcement actually means. I think there can be a knee-jerk reaction to that word, and it can scare OHV enthusiasts. Say, I'm going to invite enforcement. That means they're going to harass me. That means I'm not going to be able to do the things I used to do. But there are levels of enforcement, and there are ways enforcement can interact with enthusiasts short of ticketing. But Mark, I've heard you talk about this before, so you know what I'm talking about. Would you take over?
Yeah, we have a saying in the Great Trails book written by Dick Duford that positive programs equal positive relationships. So, you know, when we say enforcement or when members of the public say enforcement, oftentimes what they mean is they just want to see an agency presence. They don't want everybody going out and getting tickets. They definitely want tickets when the knuckleheads are causing problems and going where they shouldn't be. But a lot more of it is just educational contacts, having a relationship with their land managers, knowing people are out on the trails, and you know, they consider that enforcement. And a lot of times, you know, Forest Service, BLM, they use people that aren't you know, law enforcement officers to make public contacts. Sometimes they write tickets, but I think a lot more people are focused on education and helping people do the right thing, knowing where to get their maps, knowing where to get their trail passes or registrations, and knowing where to ride. And so, you know, some people get up in arms about seeing cops at the trailhead. I don't. I think it's great. I like to see them out there. But, you know, when you see enforcement requested, it really focuses more on just having that interaction with the agencies out on the trails instead of, you know, just at maybe a quarterly meeting of the board or anything like that. It's nice to share those trail experiences with your land managers and build better relationships out there. And I think that can go a long ways towards what people actually mean when they say they want enforcement.
Well, you know, and I'm not going to throw any particular town under the bus, but I've been watching a situation out Utah, and, you know, talking about enforcement, you know, there is law, the complaints they're having right now. If you boil all the complaints down, it's really, the laws are already there, and just nobody's really, you know, sound laws, you know, blaring a stereo going through town at 2 o'clock in the morning. You know, if you did that in your car, you'd get a ticket. You know, I mean, or you'd at least get stopped, right? And I think that's what sometimes it doesn't always, like you said, doesn't always mean a ticket. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, if you're zipping down into town or out of town or whatever, into, you know, public area or, you know, housing area, that you know, you may get a little stop and say, hey, you know, how about cranking that down or turning it off until you get to the outside of town? So when you look at it, enforcement, you know, sometimes they think that exactly what you said. They're going to come out there and, you know, I'm not going to look just right, and they're going to try to pick on me because I ride a KTM and not a Husqvarna or something, you know, and that's what everybody thinks. But again, you know, a lot of the stuff is stuff that you would get a ticket for or get stopped for if you was in any other vehicle, you know, and sometimes they just, I don't know if the law enforcement, why sometimes they just don't look at that. Sometimes it's exactly like a car, but it comes down to the community too, you know, or whatever. Like you said, they have to be involved. You know, if they have this problem, then, you know, you go and say, okay, what's the problem and how do we stop it? And, you know, I think I was telling Matt the other day is when you come into a town, small town, what's the first thing a lot of times you see is a sign that says no Jake brake usage.
Right.
You know, that's common. Right. So, you know, things like that, you know, these people are complaining about, I think could probably be readily fixed with just communication between, you know, and like you said, I think Dwayne said he was saying about, you know, the working together, you know, the communications between, you know, the towns and that kind of stuff. And that's really, you know, like I say, everybody gets on their own side sometimes and don't want to work together when it would be pretty easy to listen to what needs to be done. And, you know, he was also mentioning the amount of rentals now that's allowing people to get out there. And like you said, sometimes they aren't aware of, hey, this is great. You know, I'm on my dirt bike or a enduro bike, and I can go out and breeze through there and race from red light to red light until I get out of town and all that kind of stuff. And they just not, you know, gotten that fever. So, you know, it is a lot of education, you said, but I think a lot of it though really is just enforcement that's enforcing the rules that's already here, not imposing anything more. Long-winded answer anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And, one other point I would like to draw out is, Mark covered all the ways what it can be considered as enforcement. It's not always an LEO with a gun and a badge. But I can also say that law enforcement officials with the gun and badge, any one of them worth their salt is going to know the difference between somebody who's lost and scared and somebody who's out there kicking up dust for the fun of it. And they'll know how to take the appropriate action in either case. So we rarely have to be concerned if we see, LEO out there. We should welcome it. And there are cases, of course, somebody could bring up where there was an LEO who maybe didn't like OHV recreation, but that's not the case universally. And if we can stop the person out there intending to do harm and help the person that's lost and scared, we're probably in good shape.
Yeah, I mean, we last year we dealt without the Maumee helmets. I mean, just a simple thing that just comes natural to us as, I've been riding all my life, and how many times we were out there riding in especially the newbies, the rookies, they're out they get the side-by-sides and stuff. And again, I think they just don't always know this is what you need to do, even though it's posted, but just having that law enforcement presence, man, makes a huge difference. And then it trickles to the community. You just talked about that. That stuff goes online. Well, they're checking stickers, they're checking sound, they're checking helmets, they're checking gear, eye protection, all that stuff. And it just makes it better because I think at the end of the day, we just want everybody to be safe, right? Kind of getting to NOHVC's, number one rules is safe riding, right? And
I don't mind the sheriff going by my house to get out to the forest to check it out. More traffic coming down through here is even better. They're watching my place too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a nice carryover effect. And yeah, to the gear and helmets, there is education. And what you see is the people who have been invested in the sport for their entire lives, like probably everybody in this podcast, they tend to lean towards the helmet, understand it, lean towards the rest of the gear, and it's all important. But, somebody who, again, getting back to the ROVs, where it feels familiar to sit in one because the controls are similar to what's in your road-going vehicle. But the outcomes that could happen if you don't wear the appropriate gear are different than in a vehicle, a road-going vehicle. So education is key. And, I've had little minor spillovers and gotten back to camp and then realized I had a gouge in my helmet after I got back. Not wearing the helmet, a little spillover could have been a trip to the hospital as opposed to a nice, people laughing at me for falling over around the campfire, right? So it's personal to me. It's not just my job. I believe in the gear, and I would encourage everybody to wear it.
Well, I crash so much. So, they've been asking you to double mask. I wear 2 helmets. Yeah, it protects me really good. Yeah. No, I've been riding for a long, long time, and I crash a lot. So I'm a firm believer in every bit of protection gear you can get.
Gravity beats him, Marty?
All the time,
I can tell you this is a true statement. Every time I've been on 2 wheels in sand, I've had to pick the bike up eventually.
So you didn't like the NOHVCC? What was it in 2018? The conference was in Michigan, right?
Yes, yeah. I loved the side-by-side I was in. I'm happy with that now. I can't do 2 wheels in sand.
I tell you what.
You could not convince him to get on a bike out there in Michigan.
That's what I grew up riding, enduros and trail riding up in the state of Michigan. So that's like right at home for me. But I tell you, when I was at you talk about the side-by-sides and I have a 2-seater Polaris Ranger 570 I use around at the house, and we do use it when we do trail maintenance at the state forest, and it's nice to have get pack the gear in there and stuff. But when we were at the NOHVCC conference in Reno, we rode those. They were 1,000cc turbo razors or whatever they were. I could not believe the power on those things, and I just I would say I'm a fairly skilled driver, right? But I just picture absolute beginners in one of them things.
Oh yeah.
Holy smokes. I mean, it could be a real serious. And then they, like I said, last year we had these situations where we're seeing them out there with no helmets. And it's like, oh man, we got to just be really careful. Really careful.
I'm a bike guy, and my wife and my daughter and my grandkids, we have a 4-seater Polaris, and everything has in an off-road. We also have a Jeep, and in the old days I had a Volkswagen Beetle that we ran through the hills of Arizona with, but it is nice because, and that's one of the things when you start seeing the 4-seaters and stuff, it is family. You very seldom you see 4 adults in a side-by-side. Occasionally, but usually it's grandpa and grandma and a couple of grandkids, or parents and the kids. So there's a lot more to just throwing me on the back of on a bike and going. Now you've got 3 other bodies that you have to think of, and that's like I said, it's easy because it's like getting in the car.
And how great is it for anyone of any age, for their mental, spiritual, and physical health, to be able to get outdoors. There's a heavy focus on preserving outdoor, our natural resources. But the only way some people will have the opportunity to see some of this stuff is in one of these vehicles. And that's just awesome. And on the same token, maybe the young son takes out the vehicle the next day and has a different experience. But they're just wonderful vehicles that get more opportunity to more people to see more things. And we want to continue that. And the best way to do that is to ride safely and responsibly, gear up, stay on trail, everything that NOHVC is always harping on. And we harp on it for good reason, because that's what will preserve the future of our sport. That's what's going to make sure we get back to the campsite safely. And that's what's going to make sure we have great relationships moving forward with everybody who goes outdoors.
In technology now, too, I was just in the last week, I've been installing radios in a number of a group that rides in. That's communication's a big deal. With these guys that, hey, here comes some bikes or here comes some other stuff. So that's a big thing in the safety side. But we were also watching, looking at his new, the Polaris has a new deal where you can actually see all the riders in your group. Actually,
like an app or something. So
no, it's right in there. I don't know what they call ride track or something like they call it. So you actually can see where everybody in your party is.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty good. So now, things are getting better and better, hopefully safer and safer. Like I said, the communications, we've been using communications on our 2-wheel on our bikes. And actually when, my wife and grandkids and stuff go, we're always, we ride Arizona. So it's not single, it's not one-way trails. So it's 2-way. So it makes it nice to know that, hey, here comes another vehicle, or here comes another side-by-side, here comes bikes or whatever. Right. So we all can be on the same page. The hand signals for a bike is great, if new people out there riding understands what you're doing. But even with that, there's a lot. But communication makes it very safe too, now. So that's why I said a lot of the groups you're seeing now is, getting communications to stay out there and make it safer too. And hopefully if there is.
I mean, technology is definitely going to be a driver in safer use of these vehicles moving forward. But it's actually interesting. We did an article about this. We have a board member, Steve Newton from Alabama, who had a really low-tech idea that everybody probably would have done 50 years ago, but we tend to rely maybe too heavily on technology these days. And he realized that he was out on a ride with some club members, and club member or two he didn't know very well. And he realized that if there was a reason he needed to contact emergency services for one of them, he wouldn't know what to tell them. He wouldn't know who their emergency contact was. He wouldn't know if they had special needs, or if they had allergies or any of this stuff. So they basically made a form with all the pertinent information, who to reach, laminate it, put it in the same spot in everybody's vehicle. And now should something go wrong, they will be able to do that, contact who they need to. So it's just being vigilant. It's using common sense, and it's working together. And I think what you were talking about is probably Ride Command from Polaris, which is a map.
Ride Command. Yes. That's it. Yep.
And yeah, the idea that you can quickly locate somebody who may be, we always think of, in this situation, okay, they're in an ATV accident, right? Which is possible no matter how much we mitigate against it. But it could also be a heart attack or a seizure or any number of other things. And being able to quickly get back to someone who needs help in that way is game changer.
Absolutely. Well, I don't have anything left for them. Marty, do you?
No, just thank you for coming on with us today. And, it's always great to get some, I guess, backroom information on what happens to, what needs to be done and how it gets done and all the hard work that's being done so that we can go out and enjoy a short, brief weekend day, to ride for a couple hours. And, we don't have a lot to think about other than loading our bike and going and to think about all the things it took to get that trail there. We really thank you very much.
Yeah, no, we're glad to do it. And I was really proud of Mark and thought he was still in the show until his dog showed up. And then we know who the real star is.
Well, again, if Mark ever decides to quit, I'll get my resume over there to you, just in case,
He's a young man, so he's got a lot of years before he retires.
Yeah,
I think.
I'll be the guy that you guys got to come out because I've had a heart attack.
I can give him the answer. I'm sure he hears from a lot of people is, well, we need volunteers.
Yes. Well, I can't think of anything better to do than volunteer riding a dirt bike. Building some trails. Pretty good gig. Yeah. Like I said, we came across I don't know if it's a sheriff or what it was up in Michigan. Who does the trails? Are they sheriff?
No, the forest.
Yep. And here he is. We're out riding. The family's all out riding. We've got everything out there and we're zipping around and come around the corner and here sits this 4-wheeler. And, and he has blue lights on it and everything. And he's just sitting there. So we stopped and said, we didn't realize who he was at the moment when we first got there. Right. Then he turned the blue lights on for the kids and stuff. But, he stopped there and we started talking to him. He goes, oh, yeah, I'm just out here. I'm in enforcement. Like, oh, man, what a job. Yeah. I don't know that I want to be on a 4-wheeler, but nice Husky 300 would have been. Yeah, that would have been better. But get some blue lights on the Husky. I can do that. There you go. So it's cool. We chatted with him for a little bit, but and that's really, like you said, enforcement is, slowing somebody down, remind them that, that the helmet, probably should be strapped up and not left dangling. And, and it's like anything, but it is fun to see somebody that's got a job like that too. That's pretty cool. Oh yeah. They're great people. They're just like everybody else. They're just doing their job. But how would somebody learn about NOHVCC, Dwayne? Well, the easiest way is, of course, to visit www.NOHVCC.org. You can get an idea of all of our programs. You can register, which will allow you to get, we do quite a bit of articles and blog posts and send out emails. I'd encourage you to get involved with that. You'll get to see what we're about. There's also an opportunity to be a state partner. I mentioned them at the beginning. And if you think you have interest in serving in a national role for your state, representing the enthusiasts in your area, check it out. You can do that on our website as well. Yeah, you guys have by the way, you guys have a great website, and I think you got some just to talk just 1 minute about it, but you guys have some videos on there for kids just to kind of break the concepts down for them, if I remember seeing that right. Yeah, that's our adventure trail, and you can link to that directly from NOHVCC.org. And it was designed to target, young people who it's cartoons that shows the what to do and what can go wrong if you don't do what you're supposed to do. And it's worth taking a look at. The artwork is very cool and funny. And Mark and I, we act a little younger than we are, so we still get a kick out of it. So if somebody, like you said, wanted to volunteer, would they still go to that same site and shoot somebody an email, or how would they? Absolutely get in touch with us through that site, or you can always email trailhead@NOHVCC.org, which will go to all staff and somebody will get back with you. Okay. Any parting thoughts, Mark, before we depart here?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you guys, and really enjoyed it. Great. Well, we appreciate dinner time for you, isn't it? Yeah, and my family's home now, and my son's 3, and he's running through the house yelling. So that's cool. I'm probably not going to be able to talk without background sounds anymore. That's okay. The window is closed at this point. Well, right. We appreciate you both being on, and Dwayne, and any kind of leave it with you before we close out. But any parting thoughts for you? Thanks for having us. Really appreciate what you're doing. And, it's hard. You talked about how hard we work and we do, and we're proud of what we do. But, the clubs and associations are the lifeblood of our sport. And without what you guys are doing, we wouldn't have any way to know what was going on or get engaged. And we find when we visit states, when we do our Great Trails workshop or we do a project, we end up meeting people like you and getting the clubs to respond, and we come back for more. They want more from us. We want to help them more. And,
So yeah, really the thanks are an enthusiast. We'll do our level best to put great stuff on the ground and to continue to push for safe and responsible use. But in the end of the day, it's the clubs and associations that are really making it happen.
Well, if you get to Ohio, Northern Ohio, we're here. We would like to have you guys come visit us a little bit.
Anytime.
You'll come into the live studio and sit around and chat a little bit about things too. So we hope there's going to be a lot of new things going on. Hopefully as this, the pandemic slows down a little bit and we get back to doing the work that we need to do. So again, you come our way, both of you guys, the door is always open to come see us.
Awesome. When you were talking earlier, Martin, about all the great trail opportunities and how there wasn't, user conflict, I was going to ask if I could move into your garage, but I don't know if
yeah, sure.
You go.
We're always looking to play around all the time.
Absolutely. So. There's like 3 or 4 motorcycles.
Well, I do have a very quiet bike sitting over here to the left of us. It's an Alta electric, so I can scoot through the woods and not make any noise.
You don't even hear Marty.
Don't even hear me.
No.
You just hear me yelling and screaming because I'm bouncing off trees and that kind of stuff. But other than that, I'm good.
We appreciate your guys', Mark and Dwayne, your leadership at NOHVCC, and keep doing what you're doing. You guys are doing a great job, and as a club member and president of our club, it's really been great to see what you guys are doing, and keep fighting for the trail riders of the United States. But Marty and I want to thank you for tuning into season 2, episode 7, and once again want to thank our guests, NOHVCC's Dwayne Taylor and Mark Hildesheim, for joining us. If you have any questions, comments, ideas, or guests you want to hear from, we want to hear from you. So send us an email at ToledoTrackandTrail@gmail.com. Until next time, we hope you and your family can get outside and enjoy the sport of motocross and off-road racing and riding. Stay on the track and trail wherever you are and be good stewards of the sport that you love so much. On behalf of my co-host, Marty Wheeler, I'm Matt Bucher. We thank you again for tuning in to the Toledo Track and Trail podcast. Stay safe, everyone.